All right, Grasshoppers, she's back. We cannot get rid of her. We tried to get rid of her, but she's back. Just kidding.
That's
just
right.
kidding. Allie's here. How you doing, Allie?
You're stuck with me.
Yes, totally. And I'm very happy about that. Great friend now. You bring a lot to my life. So all good stuff. All good stuff. How are things going there?
They're going really well. Thank you. I think that water is important for, muscle endurance and form. Is that right, Tom? Because I didn't feel great running today. So I think I'm.
Didn't hydrate? Yes. You got to be hydrated. No question. Yeah. You got to be hydrated. I fast, as you know, I fast in the morning, but when I get up in the morning, I get a big jug. It's like, it must be a gallon. And that's why I make my amino energy drink with lots of water and everything. So.
Oh, that's right. You do that at 4 a.m.
That's
or 3:30 a.m.?
That gets made at 3:40 exactly. That gets made,
okay.
And then we're off to the gym. So that goes with me. So get fired up too. And I also do my apple cider vinegar in the morning too. That's a nice little shot to get you going too in the morning.
That is shocking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But then,
so I have a mild grievance to levy against you about this whole fasting thing.
Let's go.
So I did that last week, and I accidentally did it like 3 days in a row and not with a real plan. And so what happened is Friday night, I overdid it on pizza.
Oh.
And then I got incredibly thirsty, and I had to get up early the next morning to go drive to, the rink, right? Of course. So one must plan one's fasting and not do 3 in a row and eat properly afterwards, right, Tom?
Well, you can do 3 in a row, but it's like planning it. Yes. Like it can't just be, people say, well, I naturally fast because I skip a meal. I mean, there's lots to, and I'm really big on, I've heard people say that, okay, they're fasting, so then they can just eat whatever they want after. Well, I think that kind of defeats the purpose, right? You want to be pretty healthy. Mm-hmm. Now, pizza once in a while isn't the end of the world, but yeah, if pepperoni pizza, there's going to be a lot of,
it was white pizza, but still there's a lot of salt in there.
Yeah.
And invariably, if you do that to yourself at night, it's like 3 a.m. You're waking up.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about the house.
That's fine. He's fine. He's bringing some action.
Hydrating.
It's an action show.
Everyone's home.
So everybody, like your family is getting pretty healthy, right? Doing a lot of chin-ups and the diets and all that kind of stuff too. The kids are,
They are. Hey, Dad, do you want to come show your guns to Tom?
No.
We're actually live right now. It's not polite to say no. I think he needs to work up to it.
So that's fine. So we've been the other one there where before the show started, he's still trying to make his grilled cheese in the toaster there. We're trying to get him changed, but he's his own man. He's going to do it his way.
That's right. These are the people I live with. I'm 1 woman and 3 men, and they are all single-minded about how they choose to do things. And Sam contests that the grilled cheese in the toaster is not the problem. It's the burnt cheese on the heating element that's actually the problem. So if I were to clean that off, we would have no issues.
That's pretty good logic. Good thinking by him. Wow, yes. That's very creative. Very creative. Well, then we may want to say, well, how did the burnt cheese get there then?
Lack of use of the little pan that's meant to collect such cheese. Yes. Yeah. He also tries to claim, do you know what entropy is? Entropy is the natural tendency toward chaos that almost all matter takes. Well, he has tried, this is about a year ago, so let me see if I can conjure the logic properly. But his contention is that he really shouldn't clean the room, because if he cleans the room, then, and because it's a closed system, then the chaos will ensue elsewhere in the house. Because there's he's coming to correct me. This could be dangerous.
Okay.
Recall that we're live, Sam, please. So anyway, he insists that maybe, a steady state of chaos all the time is better than, a deep clean, because that will then cause chaos elsewhere where the rest of the family lives.
How old is Sam?
He just turned 16.
So that's pretty good. 16 years old to be able to come up with that logic, like, and actually sell it too. That is the facts.
Well, would you like to correct the logic?
No, just stop talking about me, please. There's a whole lot of stuff wrong.
You're world famous now. You're famous. So, how's everything going with the pandemic down there? Any changes or?
Interesting. I was just listening to, some people that I really like. And I think what I might do sometime is share with you the people I enjoy listening to, in case some of your grasshoppers also like to nerd out a little bit. But there's a whole range of people, virologists that you can listen to for 90 minutes. And then there's other people who have much shorter shows and really lay things out in very comfortable language. So why don't I maybe shoot you a couple of those and you can put them in the show notes, the actual links. So I'm listening to lots of people all the time, and it's looking like case counts are coming down across the board. It's looking like, hopefully hospitalized patients and very sick patients that will follow suit eventually. Mm-hmm. So I'm optimistic. More and more vaccines are being administered, and the more people who actually become infected. And remember, the cases we're detecting are only a portion of the total number of people who actually are infected. So I'm thinking that we'll see some community immunity really come to helping us out. We were actually talking about trying to measure that in our hockey family, what proportion have actually had the disease and what proportion have had vaccines, so that we can be planning our protocols for next year. Because we've been very, very strict this year, and honestly have not seen within rink transmission since November, with the exception of, possibly one incident. We really think maybe that might have been not on the ice, as a matter of fact, but in a closed area where people were changing, because we shut the locker rooms down, right? So people have to go elsewhere to change, especially people who are like playing hockey and then going to work. You don't wear your hockey gear to work, so. Maybe you do.
Yeah. I hear about new strains like coming out of the UK and that kind of stuff. Is that accurate? Is there constantly these new strains?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, we should probably call them variants. I learned this a couple of weeks ago. A strain requires that to use that word. You don't get to use that word really unless the virus actually has a totally different biological function. But right now it's still doing the same thing. And so really these are variants. So they're mutations causing a small change in some of the protein structures. And if there's one thing I could encourage people to do, it's think about structural biology and what that spike protein is actually doing. There's a couple simulations, animations on the web about how that spike protein actually attaches to your cell and draws the two membranes together. It is so fascinating. I think I started to get a little giddy about this last week, but so these variants do cause some changes, and they are requiring us to respond, right? Our bodies to respond and create different antibodies for those of us who have natural infection. And in fact, the monoclonal antibody, the synthetic antibodies that the manufacturers are making, like Lilly, are responding as well and developing new antibodies that can attach to these variants. So the vaccines look like they're so far good, a little bit reduced efficacy, I should say effectiveness out in the real world, but efficacy is for the clinical trials. But we're doing all the right things, and we're doing things that we've really never done this fast before. And I think we're just in such an exciting time right now, following what the scientists have actually been doing for a decade. But now it's like the labs are all thrown open, and we can really see and hear in real time because we're all mesmerized by this process, Yeah. But none of this is really terribly new. Like these amazing people have been working on this for a long time,
right?
And we're ready to respond. They couldn't do it otherwise.
Right. I hope I get this correct when I say this. I was watching the Super Bowl, and they interviewed President Biden. And the question was about the vaccines, and they said at the current rate of the rollout, if they needed to have 75% of the people vaccinated, I think that was the number. It was years before they got to that point.
Well, I think I did that math one time too. I was like, this is going to take 6 years or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, we talked about, we're only measuring a proportion of the people who have had natural infection. We're like maybe getting 1/10 to 1/4 of them. And the rest of them have had asymptomatic infection, and we don't even know because they never got tested. Right. So people are estimating somewhere, 50 to potentially 100 million people have actually had infection. I was just listening to that this morning before I came on with you. I do try to stay current before you ask me your great questions.
There you go.
And so you have that pool. There's 330 million people in America, and you have potentially 50 to 100 million already who have had natural infection. And we're expecting that they have some protective immunity that's at least as good as one dose of vaccine. And then you add on top of that, we have, I think, 35 million or so doses so far. I mean, so we're actually making pretty decent progress. And the big debate right now is, should we give one dose to as many people as possible and then delay the second dose? And it's very interesting listening to people talk about that debate, like delaying, expanding the time between those two doses. And I have to say, I'm right down the middle. I understand both arguments.
But if you touched on it, 50 million people, let's use that number, the low number, are already naturally infected. They don't have to get the vaccine then?
Well, they're recommending that they do eventually, but the whole question is, like, where in line should they be? And should they be at the front of the line? And some people are saying, actually, I think I think if we did a simple Venn diagram of, who has the highest risk and who's most likely to be, risk of exposure, and we looked at that, that would help us move more quickly toward where we need to be. And I think they're trying to do that. I mean, these different tiers are approaching that. They're mixing in, comorbidities as well as occupations. So I think they're trying to do a good job, in policy that makes sense and is reasonable. But I do think that it's tough for older people to track down doses. My mom went to Dodger Stadium, and there was just a line of cars getting into Dodger Stadium. And my stepdad, bless his heart, he'd already gotten vaccinated some other way. I forget how he got his, but my mom still needed her first dose. So people were trying to cut in line, and she sent me a picture of how he moved his car over to block. He's just my wife is getting it.
Right. But Ali, of the 50 million people, it's again using that number that are already naturally infected, they don't necessarily know that they are infected, though, right? That's just so of those 50 million, some people may still be they naturally infected. They still would get the vaccine because they really didn't know they were naturally infected.
Right. That could happen. And some people are wondering, well, wow, if you have a really, pretty impressive reaction after your first dose, maybe that could be a sign that you'd actually already had natural infection. And that's why your body is responding so vigorously. Right. Could they go test antibodies? The cool thing is, if you actually tested antibodies, you could decipher between natural infection and vaccine-induced immunity, because the vaccine is targeting the spike protein, whereas those of us like me who have had natural infection, my body has seen the entire virion. Right. And so the other proteins on the outside of that virus, my body has antibodies to. So you could potentially go and look at N protein antibodies, and that would flag a person with natural infection.
Right. So one of the big complaints I hear from a lot of people is just the lack of knowledge, like who to trust, and right. And it's simple. When I talk to you, it seems very simple, right? We should just be going online and these locations. But you really have a handle on the stuff. You're not a doctor. You're not.
No.
You choose to go. This is your business too, right? So you're you educate yourself on a lot of different topics in the medical world. Where do people go to get the right information? No politics involved in it. Just what is the accurate information?
That's a really good question, and it's one that one of my mentors is asking her public health students to do this semester. It's an exercise that she's asked them to go through: is how do you discern good information from bad, or just finding good sources of information? What kind of algorithm should a human being use to find good sources of information? And I do think. And I appreciate you asking me that question, because I reflect on it often. I actually don't read the news very, very much, to be honest with you. I do at night because I'm kind of curious what's happening in the world, and I really do care about international relations. But with respect to science, I tend to Google my question directly. And then one question leads to another. And generally speaking, if you pull up a news article, when you Google, you will probably find a news article right now on some question related to coronavirus. Within that article, if the writer was good, they will hyperlink to the actual study. And so you could just follow that hyperlink directly to the paper. And then if you're not a scientist or you don't really have a lot of time, at least read the abstract and get a sense for how the study was done. One thing you could look for very simply is number of patients in the study. You could look for how recent it is. I've heard that some of these articles are taking quite a long time to come out. So they were initially written in March, right? So the authors had access to some amount of data in March, but we've learned so much since then. But maybe it was trapped in the review cycle for 6 months. So you might actually look at, the submission date or when the study was actually done and the publication date. So those are just some basic things. I also have lately been listening to people, like live conversations, recorded podcasts and things before I choose to follow them. And so I will listen to somebody in a podcast and listen to what they say in response to questions and appreciate how they process information and how much they recognize their own biases and how much they equivocate and are willing to be nuanced. Or are they extremely emphatic and extremely dogmatic and not willing to entertain a contrary opinion? And I don't tend to follow those people. I tend to follow the people who seem very willing to be wrong. And once I listen to them for an hour, I'm like, okay, follow Twitter. I don't follow very many people. And so that means my feed is not cluttered with a lot of dogma.
Right.
So I think those kind of natural filters maybe help me.
You know what I love doing now is YouTube. What you get on YouTube, it's just like you're saying, it feeds you more topics inside that topic that you initially were looking for, right? So for me,
true.
I've learned a lot about intermittent fasting, for example. People have talked to me about intermittent fasting for years. I was a stubborn old guy, no, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to do that. And then once you start doing your research on intermittent fasting, and you do, what's interesting too is you do get some differing opinions on intermittent fasting too, like the number of hours to fast, which I think is very interesting to show you that it doesn't have to be exactly one way. There are different opinions.
Right.
The basic goal is good, but I find that I get fascinated by that. Then I stay on a topic and it just goes and goes. So
So how do you personally decide like who is credible and who isn't? How do you make those choices?
Great question. So you know what? So a topic like intermittent fasting. So I really didn't understand intermittent fasting at first at all. I thought it was after a certain period of time, you're burning fat from your body. So, like I said, it takes time. Like you watch a whole bunch of videos, and then somebody may have taken a stance on something or given an opinion. Then you find out, well, 10 other people that you watch videos don't agree with that opinion. Then you start to think, well, geez, it can't be the 10 other people. It shouldn't be the 10 other people being wrong. They sound like they're very credible. Maybe this other one person doesn't get it. So for me, that's, and watching them over and over, like I said, it's just, I really found it very educational to just continue to go on, like sit there at night instead of watching some TV show or whatever. Just I've got my smart TV there and I watch the YouTube videos. But that's a great question though to because again with that kind of a topic you do get a lot of different opinions. Well, I should say a lot. There's a basic belief of how it all works, but other people, like autophagy, we talked about that. Some people describe it that it's actually generating new cells. I don't believe that's true. I think it eats up the old bad cells, which allows your body on its own to build up the new cells. But when you do see people talk, those little nuances are a little bit different. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, like, have you watched Social Dilemma? That's getting a lot of conversation right now.
No, I have not.
I'd be curious what your thoughts are there with respect to your own research on YouTube on a specific topic, because the whole conversation is around algorithms and how they feed things in response to search queries and also in response to lots of other things like how many likes and maybe some of the other videos that are popped up first in your feed are ones that A, many people have watched, and B, maybe they've watched it all the way through, because I'm sure YouTube can tell the videos that people stopped watching 10 seconds in versus the ones they actually watched all the way through.
Interesting.
So
yeah,
I think that I don't know, like I don't really, I appreciate AI, artificial intelligence, and I appreciate algorithms and the efficiencies. But I also think that we should be directive as well. We humans should use our own intelligence and direct some of our own inquiries.
That's true, right? I think we really miss that. There's so many people that it's just, they just watch the TV all the time, right? So they're assuming that the news they're getting is the accurate news. So we're not doing their own research at all. Like it's rare to see people that go like yourself, and again, it's your business, but I think you do it anyways, probably, that really take the time to go really do research, right? So
well, that's true, right? I mean, research is a hobby for me, and I didn't realize that until recently. I'm like, oh, well, not everybody really enjoys that. But I actually think, people who have contrary opinions, we should not revile quite so much. I mean, sometimes we tend to pigeonhole people who are, let's just say, anti-vaccination folks. I really think that people, or even people who seem to want to ask about conspiracy theories, our immediate reaction can sometimes be very defensive and, oh my gosh, I can't believe you, believe that. But the truth is that's actually a sign that they're inquiring and they're skeptical and they're wanting to learn and they're hesitant. And I think that's actually, we talked about this, a good thing. And I think that if you're one who has a lot of information, be open and listen. And then look for the elements of truth that are driving the conspiracy theories, because they're there. Right. They would not, have life unless there was something that was true.
Totally. So, I agree with that totally. Like I listen to some of these conspiracy theories and you're thinking, no way, that's not true. But then you think to yourself, well, things have happened, right? I mean, like we were told that the air was clean around ground zero after 9/11. We were told there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, all those things. And at the time when they're telling us that kind of stuff, you just believe it. Then you find out later on, well, that wasn't so true. I mean, I've used 2 examples there, but to just dismiss a conspiracy theory is, history tells you that we shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, and I watched one conspiracy theory video that was sent to me. I watched it in its entirety, and I have a very small, advanced credential in scientific and technical writing, and part of that was rhetorical analysis, and part of that is just a document analysis, like literally how is the document constructed? Right. And how does that allow you to interpret its credibility and how persuasive is it? Literally from the document. But I took kind of that lens and applied it to a YouTube video. Right. And I picked it apart a little bit. I was like, I don't know if the people did this on purpose, but it was very persuasive because the background behind the person was dark maroon. And so that raises my level of heat and agitation just a little bit. He had his credentials on the wall behind him. Right. Oh. So you can see there's credentials. He had a bow tie. He was dressed up. you're going to think this is funny. I naturally think bald men are smart. I just think, you must have no hair because your brain is working so hard. You must be smart.
Allie, I tell people grass does not grow on a busy street. That's why men are bald. Grass does not grow on a busy street.
Oh, okay, right. That's kind of so. All of these biases, right, are at work. And then, he actually had a person next to him, a woman, that he was feeding off of during his whole diatribe, which he barely took a breath in. And so when it's all done, you're kind of like relieved. And then I realized why I was relieved. I'm like, thank God he's done talking, because he just wouldn't stop talking.
Oh, right.
But it wasn't necessarily that his message was a relief. I was just relieved that he was done, but I associated relief with him.
Right. That's funny.
So if you watch yourself, this metacognition, if you watch yourself process information, it's very interesting.
Right. There's a great famous video. It was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it. A lot of people watched it, but it was going into this long, it must be an hour long, talking about how best ways to get protein into your body. And in the past, we always thought it was steak, and chicken and all those things. And they made the case that no, the cow, for instance, that you eat to get your steak, he actually gets the protein by eating plants and vegetables. So we should just skip the logic was skip the middleman, skip the cow,
right.
Just eat plants and vegetables. And they made a really strong case. They had a power lifter on there, like the world's strongest man or something. He was a vegetarian, basically. And this really strong case of why the vegetarian type diet was the best diet for you. And that's how you get your proteins, like really lean proteins. And when you're done, you think, absolutely, I'm not eating meat again. That's the way it's supposed to be. But then they had other people come on and totally debunk it. And doctors and other people. I think there's a guy on Joe Rogan or something that came on and just made it seem like this guy's nuts. But it's interesting when you're listening to the guy talk about the vegetarian diet and how it works. Think, yeah, okay, I guess it makes sense. It's amazing how it worked. But then this other guy, and he gave facts of why that was wrong. That was just all the logic going into it was just totally false. But so that's the key, right? You can't just watch one video or read one article. You really need to do your research and find out, is this accurate or not?
Yeah, naturally, being skeptic, I think, is a good thing. Being skeptical. And it is kind of fun within my own family. I mess with my family every now and then, and I propose theorems that are complete bunk, but just,
Sure, yeah.
just to throw them out there.
What if conversation? And how does that go over? Do you guys get in arguments, or are you pretty civil about that?
Well, you try not to do it with a topic that the other person is very strong in. And so It's really not a good idea to, for instance, with Sam, to pick on math.
Oh, is he good at math? Oh, that's funny. Yeah. It is funny too. Like my sons are like that too. We get into some pretty healthy. They're intelligent guys in the business and all that kinds of stuff, and so we have some pretty good conversations. In fact, a lot of times now I just sit and listen to them and just learn a lot from them. So,
how old are they?
30 and 27.
So were they really interested in the whole GameStop fiasco?
Yes, they live in that world. Shane, my oldest son, he works for he works for a marijuana company out of Canada. Yeah.
Interesting. Because it's legal there, for therapeutic or any kind of use?
Yeah, any kind of use. Yeah, I think it's one of the largest cannabis companies in the world. It's Kronos he worked for. And he does what? Cody, my youngest son, he works for a real estate development company, but they do a lot of other stuff too. They've got REITs and everything going on where they're investing or raising money and investing money. So they're in that whole financial world. So they're not exactly tied to the stock market necessarily, but they're very well aware of what's going on. So that was interesting. And that was an interesting topic too. I didn't understand how that all worked. I guess I understood somewhat about shorting stocks and companies do that, but I didn't understand how much they were actually hurting these other small companies, right? Because they want to hurt that company and make it go down in value. And then all these other people got together and said, no, that's not happening anymore. We're new rules here. So.
Yeah, I know. I was just waiting. I mean, of course, they were going to have some new rules, but I think you remember last week we were talking about taking a deep breath during times of anxiety and stress. And I know that whole fiasco caused a great deal of stress for some people. And I think I even read in the news last night that someone committed suicide because he thought he owed $730,000. So, for anybody who's like, maybe not that particular situation, but, just last week I had a difficult day, and it's never as bad as you imagine it might be in the moment. Just take a deep breath. Somebody is going to help you out. Somebody will come along with a good idea or some way to maneuver out of a difficult situation. There's good people in the world.
Totally.
Take a deep breath, ask for help. We're all standing by wanting to reach out and help each other along. So believe in the good.
Totally.
I
agree with you. The asking for help, that's a huge thing, I think, right? And I think it's the same for everybody, but men seem to be like, man, it's hard. Like we in the hockey world, I was talking to the head of our alumni association up in Toronto the other day, an old teammate of mine, Glenn Healy, great guy, doing a great job with our alumni. But I think it was like 2 weeks ago, the way he quoted it to me was, he says, just last week alone, they had 3 attempted suicides amongst alumni members in the National Hockey. So to get to that point where, and I think a large part of it is this, it's a tough time. A lot of these older hockey players, they really survive off doing events all the time, which they're not doing now. And not just for financial reasons, but to be involved in things and everything. So it's been close to a year where these guys haven't been able to do anything. And I think it's really weighing on them. And yeah, sad stuff.
Yeah, I know. You and I have talked about that offline a little bit, how we wish we could do more. So maybe we can just
a big part of this,
maybe not live initially, but maybe we can just have a little chat. I actually met somebody here who does quite a lot of work with people who have a CTE. So that's, let's see, I'm not going to remember what the acronym means right this very second, but it's from chronic brain injury. And that really does affect people down the road. I know that there's some controversy around that. I don't want to wade into that minefield, but I do have a friend of a friend here who works quite a lot with those folks. And so it might be interesting to just have a conversation sometime about any practical advice she has for like day to day. If you have taken a lot of hits to the head, is there anything that can be done? That's the area.
That's a little bit of the common misnomer there, that people assume to have brain damage, you have to have been hit in the head. This stuff. The brain is kind of floating around inside your skull. So just that sudden impact, even if it's not involving the head, that can cause concussions and brain damage.
You're right. You're right. In fact, in Japan, when they did concussion training for the hockey kids, they get them all together. And it's interesting. It's not just the coaches. They bring all the hockey players together in a room, and the kids have to go through concussion training every year. And they literally had like a neurosurgeon come in with a little Tupperware container and tofu inside in water. And he slid it like this. And just showed what happened to the tofu. He's like, this is the consistency of your brain. And this is what happens when even a quick stop, like you said, not even necessarily an impact.
Yeah. There's a video that was done a few years ago. It was about really centering on a lot of the fighters in the National Hockey League and the brain damage and stuff that's happened to them and their life stories and everything. And then the doctors at the end of it said, well, okay, that's great. But it said probably only 5% of the people that have issues with brain damage are because of direct hits to the head. He said it was that low. It was like it talking specifically about athletes. It was more just the fact, just like you talked about, the skull banging around, their brain banging around. And the biggest problem there too is the help is out there to get to these guys. But again, they just don't want to, it's not that they don't want the help. They're just almost embarrassed. They feel like less of a man to go ask for help, like there's something wrong with them. We recently had a player, a famous player, Mark Pavlich, was played in the 80 Olympic team, great player, teammate here with the Rangers. And he went through, he had some legal issues a while ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, where he went after one of his neighbors physically, and he was imprisoned, and they found out that he was clinically wasn't fit to stand trial. And the part of what we learned from it, what we should have known was, another one of our teammates, Barry Beck, was trying his best to help him. Was doing a fantastic job, but all really had to happen was that Mark had to call the NHL alumni. There's certain legal processes too that they can't force him to get help. He has to reach out for the help to get it. He can't force somebody. So once he did that, then the league and the alumni are fantastic about helping the players.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the help is there. But.
Yeah, I know. Like we'll go in for physical therapy if we have a physical pain, right? But it's very difficult to go at, things that are lesser defined and not as obvious, or it's much harder to ask for help with those.
Well, I think I mentioned to you this Corey Hirsch, another former player, played with the Rangers, younger than I am, but him and I got to be very good friends. He had some mental health issues, has gone through it fine. He's in great shape now, but he's a real strong mental health advocate. And he wants to do a big event of some sort to reach out to people and show them, like, get a lot of people like athletes and Navy SEALs, military guys, whatever, that are viewed as really strong people, and get them together and show that they're admitting that they've got weaknesses, right? Because I think that's part of the thing that people think, well, if I ask for help, it looks like I'm weak. But if you've got supposedly strong men up there strong physically and strong mentally, acknowledging that, yes, they themselves have had problems, and yes, they reach out for help. Hopefully it helps other people realize, well, if they did it, then I guess I can do it too. So.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That would be wonderful. I have a couple of friends who do text counseling, actually. So I've been kind of interested in how that works. That's really been a great benefit during the pandemic. I have 2 friends that I got to talk to this week who do that. So there's lots of help around. There's one called Crisis Text Line, I think is what it is. Right. I'm sure a Google search, because people have access to text. You don't have to talk. No one in your house hears you if you're texting, so it's maybe a little bit easier to engage. And some of it is crisis, like you really imminent plans for self-harm. And others are really just, problem solving. Like, I feel really anxious today. And so my one friend provides some support. And okay, so what's your plan? What actually is it that you have to work on today? And then she checks back in the evening, and the person has worked through and resolved it. So some of it is just getting traction on making a plan. And that relieves the anxiety, feeling like you can get your arms around it. So
isn't that true? Like, so many people are like, oh, geez, I want to get in better shape, or I want to do this, I want to do that. It's getting started, right? It's okay, where do I start? So,
right.
Well, listen, that was great talk. I think that's really important. So the big thing I'm taking from it that I've learned during the pandemic, and that you've taught me as well, is that don't just sit there and complain that you don't trust the information, whether it's about the pandemic itself or not. There's so many sources out there to go do your own homework and find out for yourself, instead of just sitting there and watching the news. You watch one channel, they say one thing, and another channel says the other. Do your own homework, right?
I think it's possible, but we should probably follow up on it next week. Like, maybe you try an experiment. Think of a question that you would like to try to answer yourself, right? Something that comes to mind. And you and I will both research it and see what we come up with next week. Okay,
perfect. You know what? And I know what the topic's going to be already. It's the vaccine. Because so far, see, the problem is with being friends with you is I know I just asked you the question. I'm going to find out the answer. I'm going to find out myself. So,
yes, please do that. Text me what you're asking yourself.
Okay, perfect.
We'll both do that. And then I have a little thing to share with you as we end.
The other question is, should we be making a grilled cheese in the toaster?
Yes, I think you should. If you have a kind-hearted mother around, because you're stuck at home during the pandemic, and I will, of course, clean up for you, because I love cleaning silly things. I'm a real sucker.
I don't have one of those. I got to get one of those.
I have something funny for you. You've been researching coronavirus too much. If you read your shampoo bottle, I know you can't read this, and you're reading it down here, and you think you're reading, bat is the first ingredient in this scalp soothing. I read it and I go, bat? Yeah. It's not, it's oat. I literally laughed at myself. I'm like, I've really been reading way too much about this, because, bats and caves is where coronavirus emerged.
That's right. All right, great to talk to you again. We'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks.
See you, everybody.